All right, welcome back in, everybody, to another week of Sports Daily, our first full-fledged reaction Monday of the fall season, and we are jacked up for it. All kinds of stuff to talk about today here on the program. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers producing for us. So much football to get through. I don't feel like we didn't even adequately get through the Chiefs Thursday opener on Friday, so we'll revisit some of that. KU, K-State big winners. A wild, crazy NFL day, maybe my biggest bloodbath ever betting the NFL. I miss almost everything, Tommy. Like, I'm talking like 1 for 10, just an absolute nightmare. We'll go back through that. A wild and crazy NFL day, a fun NFL day. We've got giveaways. We're going to give away 3 pairs of tickets to the NHL preseason hockey game at Intrust Bank Arena. So stay tuned for your opportunity to win those tickets throughout the show today. You can, of course, call us on the IHOP hotline, which is brought to you by IHOP, where guests can enjoy 4 new sweet and savory biscuit options. That's 869-1240. You can also leave your comments on our video stream. You'll find that on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch. You can tweet at us or X at us, and we will try to get through some of that, too. Glad to be here with you, Tommy. How are you this Monday? A little bright and chippy?
Yeah, no, it's a great morning. I mean, obviously, a huge NFL slate, college football on Saturday. Woke up this morning, feels like fall outside, a little bit cooler, the rain coming down. I love it. I'm in a great mood today, even though I'm with you. I took a bloodbath in betting, and on top of that, my fantasy teams were terrible yesterday. But you know what? At the end of the day, don't really care because we got football back, and I'm all on board with it.
I actually won all my fantasy leagues, like 6-0. So that definitely helped. And the Cowboys played like they played last night. I did win a little bit on the Cowboys. You know, I picked against them in our picks, but at the end of the day, there was some like bonus. I don't even remember which side it was. And I was like, well, I'm going to take the bonus and I'll just take them to win, right? I'll just take them straight up to win because I didn't like the number. But obviously that went well for them last night. We'll talk about them throughout the week here. Not sure if we'll have time to get to it today, but maybe. It was a great college betting day for me, Tom. I got everything but, Alabama as far as the bets I actually made. So that felt nice. And as we get into KU and K-State today, it sort of still fits the profile. This happened last year too. Like, I feel like the NFL is on it from, Jump Street with like lines and all this stuff. College, I think, takes a little time, and I haven't looked ahead to this weekend, but we saw this last year. The markets were behind KU for 2 months, and for K-State, it's the same profile as last year. Like, their lines seem big, but when their defense plays the way it does, it gives you an opportunity to cover those numbers. So we'll get into both of those. Obviously, a different sort of matchup for K-State this week. We've got our KU insider, Shreya Latta, coming up in the top of the next hour. Our first visit with him of the season. We're excited about that. He is the beat reporter now for the KC Star for KU football and basketball. So we'll introduce him and get our first conversation with him coming up in the program as well. Tommy, it was the NFL. Let's actually start with college football because we'll get KU at the top of next hour. So let's hit K-State now, and then we'll get to the NFL next. But as we look back to Saturday, K-State, I mean, Tommy, when we look at the rest of the Big 12, and Texas looked great, right? Texas, who didn't look as good maybe in the opener, looked really good against Alabama. K-State has looked fantastic against SEMO and Troy. And look, Troy had a 12-game win streak, but it's not the same Troy team as last year. Their first big test comes this weekend. But this start to K-State's season, I don't know how you could be any more optimistic through 2 games.
Yeah, I had actually picked in our picks on Friday. I thought Troy would cover the number. I think it was 16.5 or something like that. I thought Troy would cover that. And it wasn't a knock at all on K-State. I think K-State is fantastic. I was just really in on Troy and their 12-game winning streak.
Sure.
They've got a great running back. They've got a really solid defense. It was impressive what Kansas State did against an opponent in Troy that, they're not going to, be world beaters, but they had been impressive over the last season or so. And so the fact that the Wildcats were able to come out, get a victory by the margin that they did, and Will Howard throwing for 3 touchdowns, running for another 2. I mean, it's what we wanted to see from Will Howard, and it's what we've expected from him as far as being a guy that, we think could be one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. could be a dark horse Heisman candidate and could potentially be somebody that we're watching on Sundays. I know that the matchup against Missouri next weekend is going to be by far their toughest test so far of the early season. But I mean, from everything we've seen in the first 2 weeks for Kansas State, and especially offensively with Will Howard, and then what they've been able to do on the defensive side of the ball, you got to feel really bullish on what the Wildcats are doing.
Early line, by the way, right now, and I just looked this up as we're talking, and I'll be all over it. K-State -5.5 on the road at Missouri, but I'm gonna jump on that again. Look, Missouri's been fine. They beat South Dakota in the opener, 35-10, and then they kind of struggled against Middle Tennessee. And I don't want to overthink that because I don't know anything about Middle Tennessee. But they get to be home for 3 straight weeks to start their season. I think there's a little pressure here on Mizzou because they see what's happening right at K-State and KU with football. And look, they may not be in the same league anymore, but there's definitely a connection between those 3 universities. So, there's a lot of pressure on Missouri here for K-State in that last one. I don't know if Will Howard's going to be a Heisman candidate. I think he can be, but they're not going to be the gaudiest statistical offense because that's not the way they play football. So it won't, it's as you stack numbers up against he and Caleb Williams and Price Shadur Sanders at this point, which we'll get to Colorado. I don't know if he'll, but as far as being a pro, that's what he keeps looking like to me. He's very efficient. He's smart with the ball. He's enormous, right? He's showing he can run a little bit. It's not the main part of his game by any means, but it's a part of his game. And so I love it. And he's got it. Again, it's so hard this time of year, Tommy, because they're not playing, up just yet to that level of competition. But the wide receiver group, which had some questions, has looked really, really good to me so far.
Yeah, and I know at least one of the questions that I had going into this season was, what do the skill position players look like, especially the pass catchers? And we know they brought in the Iowa transfer Keegan Johnson. He didn't play in the opener, and then he was relatively quiet in the game against Troy, but it was great to see Phillip Brooks, and it looks like RJ Garcia is going to be a star for this team as well. A lot of the questions that I had about the pass catchers, I want to see how they play against, better defenses, better secondaries, especially once they get into Big 12 play. But through the first couple of weeks, again, I mean, on Saturday, it was Phillip Brooks catching almost 100 yards of passes from Will Howard. And then the week before, it was RJ Garcia. You got those two, and then you add in a guy in Keegan Johnson, who is a big-time receiver coming from Iowa. I mean, they've got a pretty solid core of pass catchers, it looks like, already.
I agree. And, Sennett's there, and it feels deeper. Maybe we could put it that way. It feels deeper. Phillip Brooks is a playmaker. He got, he kind of hobbled early in the game and then was fine. So that's good news. But they are the real deal. It's interesting. I think the most interesting thing from the weekend is watching Texas there in prime time look really solid too, though, don't you think? Because right now, to me, those look like the 2 best teams in the Big 12. Texas Tech, look, I know they didn't cover the number, but they should have. They had a pick 6 like the very end of the game. I was actually impressed by Texas Tech. That I'm happy for them because I've got an affinity for that school. It's right down the road from where I grew up, and after seeing them lose the opener, I thought they showed themselves really, really well against Oregon to follow that up, because that was an opportunity, Tommy, for them to get crushed. So as we look across the Big 12, though, I don't know. I don't know how strong the league's going to be this year. If we're being totally honest, I don't know if it's going to be this top to bottom juggernaut that we thought it would be at times, or maybe it was even last year. Don't you think there's a chance the league is maybe down a little bit this year? I hate saying that, but
I think it's going to be a 3-horse race at the very top. I mean, between Texas OU and Kansas State, right? And really, I mean, I think Texas has got to be the biggest winner of the entire Big 12 weekend. Of course they are, going into Tuscaloosa and taking down Nick Saban's team. And, I think it's a combination of Texas on the rise and Alabama may be on a little bit of a decline here. It wouldn't shock me one bit, if this hangs on for Texas, to see them in the CFP. And that was a statement victory for the Longhorns. It was a statement victory for, the fact that I think that people have been questioning Texas for a long time about whether or not they're going to be able to make it in the SEC when they lead the Big 12. I think that answered some questions. The fact that they were able to go into Tuscaloosa, and really, it wasn't all that close. I mean, I know Alabama, battled back in the second half, but ultimately, it really wasn't all that close of a game. I thought Texas controlled basically the entire narrative from start to finish against Alabama. So, I mean, beyond Texas, Oklahoma had a nice win against SMU, and then Kansas State, right? I mean, Baylor looked awful, again, and they still are winless in the Big 12. Yeah, Texas Tech, they battled against Oregon, but ultimately came up short.
I think Texas Tech's going to be there at the end. I think Texas Tech's going to be.
But they're still winless, right, through the first two games.
But
so
they don't. They're winless, and I was talking to, I think, my dad about this weekend. Yeah, they're winless, but they haven't played a Big 12 game. Texas Tech wasn't going to win a national championship. So it's really like, can they compete in the Big 12? I think that they probably can. I don't think you hang with Oregon in a game like that if you're not for real. But I'm with you. Oklahoma, I don't know now. And that line wasn't very big, and we wondered about it. And it's probably got something to do with SMU, if I had to guess. But when we talk about K-State, it's really like, okay, so if Texas, and look, you don't go to Alabama and win. I don't care who the quarterback for Alabama is, unless you're good. Like, it just doesn't happen. So as we've watched Texas play now and watched Kansas State play, I still don't know that we can sit here and say anything, because Texas just played Alabama, right? And Kansas State played a different team from Alabama that's not quite the same, right? And so this will be the week I think we really get that look from K-State. If they come out and look the way they've looked against an SEC team on the road, just like Texas played, different, Missouri's not Alabama, I'm not saying that, but it's more similar anyway, then I think we can sit there and say, okay, I mean, I'm going to guess right now that K-State's absolutely there. And I thought they would be to start the year, right? I liked K-State to potentially win the Big 12 this year. Nothing has changed that, other than they haven't played that real big test yet. That comes like now, right? The rest of the way, the schedule gets tough.
And I'm going to tell you right now, and I know we're going to talk about it more in the second hour, but outside of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas State, is the most impressive Big 12 team KU. I mean, they're at home.
Yeah.
They beat Illinois in a fairly convincing fashion, right? I mean, Illinois came back in the second half a little bit, but ultimately the Jayhawks looked solid at home against a Big 10 team. As I'm going through the remainder of the slate of the Big 12 teams, I don't know if there is a more impressive team outside of those top three teams in the Big 12 than the Jayhawks. They're receiving votes in the AP Top 25 poll. I think that if you add up the votes they got, they slot somewhere around 29. They've got an opportunity to go on the road this weekend against Nevada. The line is like anywhere between 26.5 to 28.5 in favor of the Jayhawks. And I'm not sure the last time that KU has had that big of a spread on the road. It's been a long time. And I know we're going to talk about it more in the second hour, but outside of those top three teams, it might be KU.
I can't in good conscience make that bet. I think KU will win. Look at we can hit on him here just for a second. Jalen Daniels looks all the way back. Like, he looked fantastic. He looked dynamic. He was fast. He was, he was dropping dimes on some of those passes early in the game. Now they sort of let Illinois back in, which I didn't love, but there was a little bit of game script to that, I think. That doesn't worry me too much. And it's Illinois, who's not bad. They're probably a middle of the road Big 10 team. But sort of like K-State, Tom, it's pretty hard to imagine being any more impressed with KU than we've been, because they're still getting healthy. Like, Jalen Daniels is still, coming back, even though he looks all the way back. But yeah, we will talk about them more in detail. Jayhawk fans, stay tuned for that at the top of the next hour. I think the other one to touch on real quick, Tommy, before we switch to the NFL, Colorado. So it seemed like the most obvious bet on the planet to bet them against Nebraska, which always makes you a little bit nervous, right? Like, it's like, okay, well, based on what we saw in the first 2 weeks, how could you not take Colorado in the home opener and 3 points against Nebraska? And man, it was what's too good to be true was true. And so the great performance again by Colorado. Here's the fascinating thing about Colorado, who's now the markets have caught up. They're 22.5-point favorites against Colorado State now this week. So honeymoon's over. But like, I don't know that there is anybody in the country who is not a Colorado Buffalo fan right now. I mean, maybe like contrarian fun haters like that, and that's it. I'm talking like people are just who somebody was telling me yesterday, and I wish I could. I was at a birthday party, and I think it was just another dad. They're like, "Yeah, we were at a garage sale or something." There was like this 90-year-old woman going on and on and on about Colorado and Coach Prime, and I'm like, "Oh, are you a Colorado fan?" She's like, "No, I'm not." And it's just like, it's awesome, and like, it's so fun, and like get on the hype train. Sometimes we overthink that stuff and take ourselves way too seriously, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
Tommy, we work in the media. We can't root for anybody. We got to be impartial, and we're impartial when we need to be impartial when it's a serious topic. But when it's fun like this, and like everybody, I'm gonna root for Colorado. They're a blast to watch right now. They're fun. They got Michael Irvin on the sideline as a hype guy with his buddy Dion. It's like it's so hard not to get caught up in it because it seems so unlikely that one, they could turn it around this fast after how bad they were last year and for several years. Two, that Prime is this level of coach, which people, again, like I don't get why people, that's so hard for people to imagine. This is one of the greatest football players like in the history of the world at any position, one of the greatest players ever. He understands football. He's got high level kids playing football. He's been coaching football for a long time. Like, it's not that unbelievable. We just had to see it. And then these guys that transfer in from Jackson State obviously can do it at this level. Dylan Edwards is a part of that team, which of course gives us a rooting interest. Like, I love it. And I don't have any problem saying I'm rooting for them because why not? They're coming to the Big 12 next year. Man, that's awesome. Yeah. I love it.
I mean, they've got a tremendous amount of talent, especially at the skill positions. We know about Travis Hunter. We know about Dylan Edwards. Shadur Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in America through the first 2 weeks. No doubt about that. Deal. The only caveat I want to throw out there in the game, Colorado was going to win the game, I think, regardless. Jeff Sims for Nebraska was god-awful. I'm not sure I've ever seen as bad of a performance from a quarterback on in a big time game like that than Jeff Sims had. I mean, dropping the snap multiple times, throwing an interception. I mean, it got so bad that Gus Johnson was calling for him to be benched for Nebraska. So they've got the Cornhuskers have some major issues at quarterback. I thought that Nebraska's defense overall played okay. And I think that Matt Rule, it's going to take a little bit of time to get that program built up. Colorado was going to win regardless. It just probably wasn't going to be by that margin had it not been for the major mental mistakes that the quarterback for Nebraska had. But I mean, to your point, yeah, Colorado is fun. That it not only is it a hype machine and just an overall just entertainment factor, but it's a moneymaker too. There's a reason why both ESPN and Fox are having their pregame shows in Boulder next weekend for Colorado State, because they know that like they can make money hand over fist when it comes to viewers watching Colorado play.
It was the most predictable thing ever, which is why I've been so hopeful that Colorado would jump in, and that, this is the one thing I feel like we don't know is like, because everybody's going to want Prime now, right? He's going to be the top candidate for every job. Like, is he going to stay in Colorado? Who took it? Remember that famously, like, Colorado didn't even have the money to pay him. And they were like, you know what? We'll figure it out. Let's get him in here, because they were smart enough to know what could happen here. And yeah, it's been the most predictable thing ever because it's made for television. And it's, Tommy, there was not, and this is crazy to think about and remember, but think about the middle of Prime's, glory days, Cowboys Niners years. He was he was maybe the most must-see player. And I grew up as a Cowboys fan, and he was on both sides of that. Like, I remember watching Cowboys games, and the most exciting thing and the thing everybody got jacked up for was to watch him return punts. Like he has just had this effect on football forever. And now this is happening. And it's the father-son storyline, and it's the underdog storyline, and it's the, this program that was one of the worst in the country.
You can't script it better. You literally cannot script it better.
There. And so it's like, yes, let's get Colorado into the Big 12. It's a much better fit. And I want the Big 12 to ride that gravy train, because if he stays there, all bets are off. Like, he's going to bring so much to that school. And look, the reality is, even if he's there for a year, he's already brought so much to the school. So good for them and good for him and everything else. But it's the most fun storyline of college football, hands down, out of the gates. And I think everybody's on board with it.
What's remarkable to me, by the way, is a quick side note. I didn't realize until I think I read an article a couple of weeks ago that Colorado didn't even have the money to pay Coach Prime. Like, they basically hired him, and they're like, we're going to take a gamble here because we don't have the money to pay your salary. I think they're going to be just fine being able to pay his salary.
Well, we'll see what his salary is. Let's see. It is Prime. Let's see what his salary demands are first, because you never know. All right, let's give away our first pair. ICTI's Classic, the NHL preseason game of the Arizona Coyotes and the St. Louis Blues, Saturday, September 23rd, 7 o'clock, Intrust Bank Arena. Get you a pair of tickets right now. Jad will have the winner on the IHOP hotline. Second caller during the break. We'll come back. We'll touch on NFL madness in week 1. That's next on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you. We touched on a little bit of NFL. College. Now let's talk a little bit of NFL, Tommy. It was a nutty opening weekend, just as you can almost always expect in the NFL. Makes you let me start with this, Tommy. After we saw what happened yesterday across the league, does it ease your concern for the? I think you were more concerned with the Chiefs on Thursday than I am, probably. Does this seeing everybody struggle sort of out of the gates there make you feel any better about the Chiefs' performance?
Well, yeah, I think a little bit. I mean, there are a couple of teams that really laid eggs yesterday. The Cincinnati Bengals did for sure. The New York Giants did, getting shut out in prime time. The Seahawks leading 13-7 at halftime and then ultimately losing to the Rams at home 30-13. That was bad. I mean, there were some pretty poor performances. I certainly didn't expect the Raiders to be leading the AFC West by themselves after week one. So, yeah, I mean, I think that it certainly softens the blow a little bit from what we saw Thursday night from Kansas City. I mean, it's still not great, right? But at least it did make me feel a little bit better that there were some other teams that really struggled yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, the Vikings struggled, Tommy.
Yeah.
And turned it over like 3 times in the red zone. So that's the thing to sort of wonder too, is it's a really annoying like betting adventure. But like, okay, let's think about who still feels like they're fine because that got away from them. Okay, so if we look at it in some of the teams, like Broncos, I'd be concerned, right? Like there wasn't like some at least from what I saw, some like fluky thing that happened there. They just got beat. And look, I don't think the Raiders never have thought the Raiders were going to be as bad as the masses either, because I think Jimmy Garoppolo is pretty good. And essentially the same roster a year ago was a darling pick with Derek Carr, right? And so Jimmy G comes in. I think they're not going to be the worst team in football. Anyway, I'd be concerned if I were a Seahawks fan because they kind of got their butts kicked. But like for, let's say I'd be concerned if I'm a Giants fan, obviously. But would you be that concerned if you're a Vikings fan? Again, they turned it over 3 times in the red zone. Like that was a silly loss by them. They had no business losing that game. That was probably the most frustrating betting game. Steelers, they won. The 49ers are dadgum good. I'd be concerned if I was the Steelers, but you got to reset expectations. We talked about this Friday. I'm actually on the Steelers. I like the Steelers this year, but I didn't like them in the opener against San Francisco with Purdy healthy. And did nobody watch Purdy and CMC when they were both there last year and see how good San Francisco was? Like, what did we forget about? And I know they traveled across the country, but it was in the opener. They could have traveled and stayed around town for 24 days if they wanted to. Like, that's not as big a deal as it would be in week 8. So I didn't see that. That one doesn't, like, I'm not like all of a sudden off the Steelers now. That was as
I don't
tough
know.
a
I felt
matchup
like
as they could have had.
Yeah, I felt like that game was awfully trappy as far as the line was concerned. Just because, I mean, come on, like it's
Everybody
the
was betting the
Niners.
Steelers.
It's the Niners, and Nick Bosa is back and signing a huge contract. They've got Christian McCaffrey, and come on, like their wide receivers and Brandon Ayuk. I mean, Ayuk was incredible, having 2 touchdown catches in the first half, and Deebo Samuel. I mean, like their weapons are great, and Brock Purdy. I think that was going to be the major question. And that's probably why the line was where it was. Like, is Brock Purdy healthy? How effective can he be? Is he really the real deal? Yeah, I mean, I think he kind of is. I mean, it looked perfectly fine. And when you've got all the weapons around him, I've not been as high on Pittsburgh as you've been. I feel like Pittsburgh is probably around a 500 team in my mind.
Which is what they were last year, which was a playoff team. So really,
I still think they're about a year away.
When I'm high on Pittsburgh, that means I'm thinking they'll return to the playoffs. Like, I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl. I just think they're in the mix for a wild card again. Here are the teams that I think I'm not sure how, like the Giants that obviously got away from them. I wasn't a believer in the Giants anyway as much this year. I think I'm
a bigger believer in them than you were.
I just don't think they're that talented. So like I think they were an amazing story last year, but like who's their best receiver? Top of your head.
Paris Campbell, maybe.
I mean, right? It's Darren Waller, I guess, but
true,
like receiver, like they don't have any. And like I just, if their defense is really good, then they're going to have a chance. And I think their defense has a chance to be okay. Last night, again, got away from them. A lot of those touchdowns came from, the Cowboys defense making plays, which we can talk about the Cowboys. But the other team that I think we pause at probably the most is Cincinnati. I told you on Friday, Joe Burrow struggles against Cleveland. I think he's now 1-5. Like, for whatever reason, he does not play them well at all. I also don't know how equipped Cincinnati is to win like a nasty weather game either, because I know everybody loves Joe Mixon. I've never seen that much from Joe Mixon in the NFL. I feel like he's very overrated and not dynamic at all. He's been a nice workhorse for them. But we'll see. I'm not terribly concerned about Cincinnati just because they've done this now for 3 years, which is just absolutely struggle against Cleveland for whatever reason. I'd be moderately concerned if I was the Commanders. That game was way too close for comfort. Arizona played well. Credit to them for coming out. I think Seattle probably needs to be the most concerned, and the Giants, as far as like, the honeymoon's over a little bit from what we saw last year. I think both of those teams are probably candidates for that. I will say too, though, let's not forget Matt Stafford's back. Right? Matt Stafford versus anybody else they had last year is a big difference. Healthy Matt Stafford anyway. So that's a factor too. And well, boy, you look back at fantasy football draft, like Matt Stafford wasn't even getting drafted. And it's like, wow, right. This is still Matt Stafford.
Yeah. And, they really leaned on the running game in the second half with Cam Akers and the rookie Kyron Williams. Both of those guys got into the end zone in the second half for the Rams. And I think that, really it's simply put, the Seahawks took their foot off the gas in the second half, going into halftime with a lead, 13-7, and then not scoring another point in the remainder of the game. Clearly disappointing. And clearly, I remember watching some of that second half and just thinking, where's the effort from Seattle? What is happening here? And the Rams got right back into it. Just, yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting. And I heard this stat last night that all 5 of the rookie head coaches in the league, not rookie head coaches, but head coaches that are with their new team for the first game this season, all lost yesterday. And all 3 of the rookie quarterbacks that started all took a loss. Now, that being said, I think Anthony Richardson looked the most impressive out of the 3. He looked better than Bryce Young. He looked better than CJ Stroud. He used his legs, got into the end zone, had a couple of nice passes. Michael Pittman helped him out at one point to get into the end zone for the Colts. I thought Indianapolis looked fairly good. And I just kept thinking that entire game against the Jags, and ultimately Jacksonville got the win. But I just kept thinking, man, if the drama with Jonathan Taylor hadn't happened, the Colts could be a sneaky team. Like they could be a sneaky, talented team, right?
And just play.
Well, yeah, and I know the reports yesterday were that he could probably pass a physical right now to play. I just don't know if it's broken to a point of no return with him and the Colts to be able to play for them when he comes off the PUP list.
No, because he can come off. If he's healthy, he's going to play, and they're going to play him. Richardson always had the best chance of the quarterbacks to succeed because he's got his legs. I mean, he has an opportunity to be the most dynamic runner we've got in the league, and that's when we're seeing Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson in the league. Like he's just that kind of athlete. So yeah, good for them. I thought they handled themselves okay, which is no disservice to the Jaguars, who, holy moly, Calvin Ridley, he was so stinking dynamic in that first half. That kind of weapon there now is probably, hey, rest of the league, high alert. That Jag offense looks loaded, absolutely loaded. We'll see how good their defense can be. Giving up 21 to Indianapolis doesn't make me feel great about it, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But let's bring it all back full circle here, Tommy, to the Kansas City Chiefs after we take a break. Let's take a quick break, and so we'll get more thoughts now on the Chiefs looking back after we've seen a week into the NFL and all of these things, like where does their concern level fall into place? We'll do that. Let's give away another pair of those tickets, Jad, to the ICTI's Classic NHL preseason game. It's Saturday, September 23rd, Coyotes, Blues, 7 o'clock Intros Bank Arena. First caller to the IHOP hotline gets another pair of those tickets. We're giving away 2 more pairs of those, so 2 opportunities to win. Jad will get us a winner. We'll come back, talk Chiefs when we return on Sports Daily. All right, congratulations to Jason and Jared for winning our first couple of pairs of those NHL tickets. We'll give away our last pair coming up in the second hour. Also, our KU insider, Treyas Latta, joins us for the first time this season, coming up at the top of the next hour to talk a little KU football. Excited to do that. Tommy, let's relate what we saw yesterday in the NFL back to the Kansas City Chiefs. Wild and crazy everywhere in this league. That shouldn't surprise us. I do think it backs off some of the concern from Kansas City. I wasn't that concerned with the Chiefs because I thought they did so many things to lose that game, including, I hate ever putting it on one guy, but Kadarius Toney lost them that game. So it's like, everything that went against the Chiefs coming into that game. You've got the Chris Jones situation. You've got Travis Kelce hurt very late in the week, which makes you have to totally redo everything you'd been working on for the opener, which is more than even normal, right? Because you had the extra time to prepare. You got to crumple that all up. You got to throw it all away. You got to do all these things. Everything being said, guys were dropping passes, all of these things, and they still barely lost that game. After what we saw yesterday, just with a reminder of how thin that margin is, it's like, okay, well, Travis Kelce is healthy and back and everything's good. I'm really not that concerned because you didn't lose a game on the Chargers, right? They had the most entertaining game yesterday, just shootout city with Miami. I think the Chiefs are fine. I'm not that concerned. We'll see. If the wide receiver issues continue into, the next couple of weeks, I think we can be concerned at that point. I don't think they will as much, though, because they'll have Kelce there and the game plan will get back to normal.
It was still a letdown, right? And even though you've had other teams that dropped the ball yesterday, like the Bengals and the Giants and the Seahawks and others, it was still a letdown. And it doesn't totally take away the sting of losing the opening game of the season in primetime against the Lions when you're raising the banner as Super Bowl champions the year before. Doesn't really take that bad taste out of your mouth. And you're right. They didn't lose any ground on the team that I think you would think would be the most likely to challenge them in the division, the Chargers, because the Chargers lost at home to Miami, which we really didn't even talk about much last segment. So you didn't lose any ground on them, but you had an opportunity if you win that game to then be tied for first place in the division after 1 week with the Raiders and one game ahead of the Chargers. So, I know that the teams had disappointing efforts yesterday for sure. I think that there are still legitimate questions about the weapons around Patrick Mahomes. I'd like to see them answered for sure this week against the Jags. And you mentioned Calvin Ridley yesterday. He looked fantastic for Jacksonville, and Kansas City's secondary. They're going to have their hands full with the receivers that Jacksonville has. Zay Jones had a great touchdown catch for the Jaguars yesterday too. So, I mean, come on. And, Travis Etienne got into the end zone.
Secondary is their strength, which makes me feel good about that.
They're going to have their hands full though with those dynamic receivers that Jacksonville has.
Totally. I think there's a difference in letdown and concerned. Of course it was a letdown. I'm just not that concerned about it yet because, as long as Travis Kelce plays. Look, if we were sitting in the offseason and said, Travis Kelce is going to miss games. Yeah, that's concerning. For sure it's concerning. This feels like a short-term thing for a guy who's never missed games before that. So it's like, okay, if they get him back, it immediately becomes, what are the roles these receivers are going to be expected to play on this team? And that's where we can sort of focus in, I think, because it was really because I've tried to watch more. It was all very quick with the offense, everything, routes weren't given a ton of time to develop, all of these things where it just didn't feel like they were playing the way they're probably going to play, the way they had planned on playing. A lot of first reads for Mahomes, which isn't really the thing. Kadarius Toney is probably not going to be the guy in big spots to be asked to make those kinds of plays, especially now, right? He's supposed to just be the guy that, gets it out in space and makes a dynamic play in the aftermath. Sky Moore, I've watched it back because I'm trying to figure out what in the world to do with him evaluating and everything. like he never, like the progressions didn't make it to him a lot. So I don't know what to think other than they're going to get Kelsey back and they can go back to what they had planned on doing. Like it feels, here's what it feels like to me, Tommy, because that injury happened so late in the week. You've had 2 weeks. It's basically in prep time, like you've had a bye week. So you've had 2 weeks to get all this stuff ready, script it all out, everything goes, boom, late week, you got to start all over. Late in the week with a bunch of young wide receivers. It just feels like that the timing of that injury was as impactful as anything. And now hopefully they can go through a more normal, like, okay, here's what we actually want the offense to look like.
You know, my big takeaway from not having Travis Kelce on Thursday night is actually twofold. Number one, I mean, it's a given. Everybody knows the connection that Patrick Mahomes has with Travis Kelce, and just the freak of a talent that Travis Kelce is, and the way that he runs routes, the way that he's elusive, the way that once he catches the ball, the run after catch, and the way that he's able to get away from defenders. We know all of that. That's been on display forever, for a long time. But not having him there, not only do you lose that connection, but the other thing Travis Kelce does is he constantly takes pressure away from the other wide receivers. And so when he's not there, then all of a sudden the pressure gets put on the shoulders of guys like Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore and the other wide receivers, where it's not just the attention defensively that those receivers are attracting, but it's also just the fact that those receivers probably they knew on Thursday in the back of their minds, okay, well, like the option to go to Kelce isn't there. And so it's all on our shoulders. And so the more that I've thought about it, the more that I've thought, I think that the issue was actually less about the connection that Mahomes has with Kelce and more about the fact that the pressure gets squarely then put on the shoulders
100%.
of those unproven wide receivers.
Totally. And that, and that means their roles changed from what they've been practicing too.
Right.
Like it's not just like a mental thing, which clearly with the drops and all that played its way in late, but it's like they physically had to do different things. And I think it was Collinsworth brought up a really good point. Kelce is a second quarterback on the field. He makes reads at the line all the time. So they were missing that too, like him, finding different ways and what the defense is doing. It is slightly alarming that, you don't want everything to fall on the shoulders of one guy, but that's what Kelce is. He's one of the best football players ever, and especially at his position. Yeah, you're going to miss a lot, especially when you lose him late in the week. So we'll see. I think yesterday was a nice reminder, though, of you shouldn't ever panic in the NFL. Remember the Colts game last year? Like, weird stuff happens in the NFL. It's what makes it so much fun because it is so dadgum unpredictable. Can't wait to talk about tonight's game. We'll do that in the second hour. But next, our KU Insider joins the program for the first time. We'll see what he thinks about looking back at Jalen Daniels' debut and looking ahead to Nevada. That's next on Sports Daily. It's Albracht and Castor coming back at you. Hour number 2 right after this.
NFL Love Mornings with Bob and Tom on 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. It is hour number 2 of a Reaction Monday here on Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you, taking you through a wild and crazy weekend. Football is all the way back. Jalen Daniels appears to be all the way back. We are happy to be joined on the IHOP hotline for the first time this season, first of many visits with Shreyas Laddha, KC Star, beat reporter for KU Hoops and Football. Shreyas, welcome into the program for the first time. How are you, man?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
We're looking forward to this. It looks like this is going to be a fun beat for you this year because Jalen Daniels looked like he picked up right where he left off. What do we know about his health? Was he fully healthy in that game? Did he feel good? Was he still playing with a tight back? Was that 100% of Jalen Daniels, or do you think there's still more left in the tank there?
I think he was 100%. I got word that he was starting as of Wednesday. Obviously, they didn't put that out there just because of the way injuries are so finicky. But, talking to him afterwards, he was, he knew he was ready to start. He felt good all week. He kept on increasing his reps Monday, Tuesday at practice, so the coaches said. And he looked like Jalen Daniels of the old. There wasn't a lot of mistakes he made out there on the field. Besides the interception. And, they got out to a 34-7 lead early because he looked like the Heisman contender candidate that he was for the first 5 weeks of the season last year.
Shreyas, you mentioned that, big lead that they jumped out to early. It really felt like offensively things were clicking at a really high level, both with the run game with Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw, and also, like you mentioned, with Jalen Daniels. Do you believe that was, and I know that Coach Leipold mentioned this after the game, that was probably the best half that we've seen from Kansas as far as offensively is concerned in the Coach Leipold era?
Absolutely. They were clicking. I mean, there was, I think, one drive that they didn't have ended in touchdown, or they ended up having to punt. And it was a really fun offense to watch. I mean, last year was fun to watch, but they just looked great on both ends there. I mean, the defense even didn't allow more than one first down until the second quarter. And just overall, they were dominant against a team that some predicted were going to be at the top end of the Big Ten conference that they're in. And, I mean, as much of as the first real test of the season, Kansas stepped up and showcased that, last year wasn't a fluke, at least so far.
All right, Shreyas Laddha joining us, KU beat reporter for the KC Star, joining us each and every week on Sports Daily this year. Looking forward to that. So, Shreyas, we've talked about the offense now. The story of the game, I think, as far as Kansas's prospects on being, in the mix in the Big 12 and all these things, is the defense, which in that first half, like the offense, was fantastic. They did, kind of let Illinois back in, but look, KU's defense, I don't think anybody thinks is going to be like the best defense in the Big 12, but it's sort of showing us it might be good enough, right, to stay competitive once we get to conference play.
100%. I mean, they got 6 sacks, which they haven't done since 2009. And, they were pressuring the quarterback. They didn't really have any bad plays per se. This is the targeting, which, obviously those were a little subjective calls. And the real big, chunk yardage play that they gave up was when they had that 72-yard touchdown run by the Ole Miss transfer, Illinois, Luke Almeyer. And that was really the only real blemish that I remember besides the targeting that they have. But KU's defense looked really good. They pressured the quarterback. The DBs were making it really difficult for Luke to pass the ball. He ended up with less than 220 passing yards, 2 interceptions, really impressive stands when needed, especially that last Illinois drive where it looked like they were marching down the field. and boom, Kobe Bryant basically wrestles the ball out of an Illinois wide receiver. He comes away with a pick, and that was the second time that game a Kansas DB had done that. Just really impressive showing by Kansas that I think they really needed this year. That defense needed to take a step forward after being ranked 127th in the country, and I think they have.
I want to ask you a little bit about the running game here. So Devin Neal finished with 120 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Daniel Highshaw 2 yards away from 100, finishing with 98 and a touchdown. Those two guys run completely differently. The way that Devin Neal runs the football, the way that Daniel Highshaw runs the football. It looks like Highshaw is completely 100% healthy after his season-ending injury a year ago. They both, like I mentioned, do things differently. And in your mind, we know the kind of dynamic athlete that Jalen Daniels is at quarterback, both throwing the football and running it, but having a couple of running backs to be able to take the pressure off the pass game. I mean, how versatile do you think that this offense can be with those two guys running the football?
I mean, it's incredible, because Jalen is good in the air, but like you said, he's great with the ball in his hands and that option. And there's always what makes Kansas offense so unpredictable, and Andy Kotelinke kind of an offensive genius and a guy that's probably going to have head coaching jobs, coming in the coming years, is you really don't know what you're going to get day in, day out, because they always have, different formations, different plays. They started the game with Jason Beam and Jalen Daniels kind of lined side by side, and it looked like you didn't know who's taking the first snap. A little trickery there, playing into the hand of everyone thinking Jason might be starting or Jalen might be starting or whoever. The running backs, like you said, they're great complements to each other, almost like fire and ice in the sense that, they do what needs to be done. And Highshaw coming back is so key, because he was great last year, averaging like 5.9 yards per carry before he got injured. And if those three, that trio of Daniels, Highshaw, and Neal, can stay healthy the entire year, I feel great about KU making another bowl game. And I have them going 9-3 this year with an upset of OU and winning a lot of the 50-50 games, because I really do believe that trio and Lance Leipold, that level of talent that Kansas has at those skill positions is very, very impressive. And I think it's something they haven't had in years until these three have arrived.
It doesn't sound like, Shreya, that you're too impressed with Nevada. You tweeted out earlier that they look like maybe the easiest matchup for KU this year. I haven't watched any of them. Tell us about Nevada road trip, True Road, all that stuff this week as we look ahead for Kansas. I mean, it is a road trip. It's late night, but they get a ton of time to prepare for it. What do you think about Nevada?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, they were they played an FCS team in Idaho last week, and they were supposed to be they weren't favorites that game. It was Idaho, and they lost 33-6. And then week one, Caleb Williams and USC tore them apart 66-14. So they really are a good football team on both ends. They kind of have a quarterback issue. Both quarterbacks have combined for one touchdown and less than 300 yards between both games. And between them, they have less than 400 yards total. The defense is horrendous. They've averaged over 565 yards given up on overall. And they struggle to contain the passing game, over 380 yards to opposing offenses. Same thing with the defense or the running game. Kansas should really win this one handedly. And ideally, you're seeing reps for Jason Bean and some of the other guys by midway through the third quarter. Because even though it's a road game, and obviously it's the first true test on the road for Kansas, I'd argue that Nevada, with the way they're constituted and the way they were last year, which the team was 0-8 in that West Conference and 2-10 overall, they're even worse than last year, in my opinion. And this might be the easiest game on KU's schedule, to be quite frank.
Sharice, I want to dial in on something that you said a couple of minutes ago that I can't ignore, because I heard you say it, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So you think that the Jayhawks are going to have an upset of Oklahoma this season and win 50-50 games? and you have them finishing at what, 9-3? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that, and we had this conversation last hour that, at least in my opinion, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but outside of Texas, Kansas State, and Oklahoma last week, the most impressive Big 12 team might very well be the Kansas Jayhawks. So, I mean, knowing that and knowing as you're going game by game and finishing up with that 9-3 overall schedule, what about this team tells you that you think that, number one, they're going to be able to upset OU, and number two, that those 50-50 Big 12 games are going to go the way of the Jayhawks?
So the 50-50 games, the way I looked at last year was they had a top 10 offense in most metrics, and that was with Jalen missing 4 games and Highshaw missing pretty much everything after him getting injured. And last year, the defense was really bad, number 127th in the nation. And the special teams was pretty horrendous too, ranked last in the Big 12 in field goal percentage. So Kansas went out and got a lot of transfers on the defensive side of the ball and kicking game. They've gotten a guy in Seth Killer, who is an average 86% kicker over 3 years at Texas State, was nominated for multiple preseason awards. Watch list, and he's been pretty great so far. He had a nice 41-yard boot last game, and he hasn't missed a field goal yet or extra point. So the special teams already looks better on that end. Plus, Sean Snyder has come in, and his resume on the special teams end of things is very, very impressive. He's won multiple awards, and he took USC to the best special teams unit in the country twice in the years that he was there coaching. So I think special teams take a big step up. And the defense, I always expected to take a step up. And I was like, I don't know if is a step up from 127 to 100, or is it a step up from 127 to top 75? And so far through 2 games, it looks like closer to top 75 than top 100 level defense, which is huge. And then you kind of go back to look at the schedule, and I was like, okay, I think they lose. This was beginning before the season started. I was like, I think they lose to Texas Tech. I think they lose to Texas. I think they lose to K-State. And then I picked the OU upset because, OU, like KU last year, had a very similar team, a good offense, a shaky defense. They got better on both ends there. But the game wasn't super out of hand last year. And the year before that, I think it came down to the final quarter. And Kansas is playing at home, I believe, this year, and they haven't beaten OU since, I think it was 2007 or 1995. I don't remember which one it was, but it's been a long, long streak. So my thought process is, they're going to the SEC next year. Why not this year be the year Kansas finally breaks that streak and upsets OU? Everyone talks about K-State, but K-State, I think, is a more formidable team than OU is this year. And as long as Jalen is healthy and the running backs stay healthy, I feel good about as good as this Kansas team has felt in years. Jalen, in my mind, is as good as a quarterback as Kansas has had since Todd Reesing. And that's, a guy who could probably play on Sunday, if the way his career has gone continues to go and he stays healthy.
He did look good throwing the ball. Shreyas Laddha joining us, KU beat writer for the KC Star, KU insider for us this year. I do. Let's talk about Jalen for a second, because I keep thinking the same thing. Like, if he's there, they got a chance to be really competitive. But the back is different than the shoulder last year. And we've heard Lance Leipold say this is something he's dealt with. I'm having a really hard time understanding how serious this back issue is. How serious is this back issue long term? Or should we always be watching that, like every time he takes a hit? Or is this just a minor thing that he knows how to work through?
I think it's one of those things that they've been super cautious about because they understand how important Jalen is to that offense. A little bit extra cautious, I think. I think he could have easily played week 1 if absolutely needed, but why risk it? And it was a true game time decision. I asked him about it, and he was like, honestly, it was a game time decision up to warmups, really, for week 1. And that's why Lance had said expect it. So he has to be careful about it because back injuries and stuff like that back tightness is so finicky that anything like that could always get aggravated or whatever. But he told me he's 100%. He feels good and ready to go. And, he feels like he can do everything that he does last year. And if you notice, he's bulked up a little bit, and he told me he's faster than he's ever been, which I thought was interesting. So Kansas has tried to work hard to make him bulletproof, as Andy Kotelinski calls it. So they don't want him to have nagging injuries or something like that. And he definitely, obviously with the Illinois defense, the way they were set up, he ran the ball, I think, a little more with a little more propensity than he did last year in most games. So I think it's something to monitor, but unless it flares up again, knock on wood, he shouldn't really have any issues with it.
The newest AP Top 25 poll came out yesterday, Shreya, and the Jayhawks are receiving votes in the Top 25 poll. I know that ultimately it comes down to the teams in front of the Jayhawks and what happens with them this coming weekend. But what are the odds in your mind if the Jayhawks go to Nevada, get a big victory, maybe even cover the spread, which is somewhere around 26 to 28 points as of right now, for KU to sneak into the top 25?
I mean, I give it pretty high, to be honest with you. If they come out and go in Nevada, win by 60 or something like that, they'll probably be ranked, in the 21 to 25 range. And if not, they'll probably be the highest in the others receiving vote category. And if they beat BYU by game 4, they'll definitely be ranked heading into the Texas game. So, I mean, they got 19 votes. So people paid attention to what they did against Illinois. And I think the Nevada game, obviously, everyone expects them to win, but they need to win it with, kind of some malice, as I say, and blow them out and not really make it a game, especially if the defense looks good. I think that's a big sign. And I think that'll be on voters' minds.
It'll be pretty fun to watch them potentially climb up the rankings. All right, Shreya, what do you have coming out this week? What are you working on, and what can people check out at the KC Star?
Yeah, I have 5 things to know about Nevada coming out later today. KU depth chart, then I'll have a story from the presser today at 11:15 that we have, and just the typical, pregame stuff, coming out, which will be fun. I have a cool segment that I'm still figuring out, but doing some film stuff with a former KU quarterback, which I'm excited about, and we'll announce a little more once we get everything figured out. But just typical pregame stuff that you can find at kcstar.com, and should be a fun week. First road game, first traveling for me for football besides the bowl game. I came in enjoying around then, so it'll be fun.
You can follow Shreya on social media at SHRE98. Find his work there as well. Nice job, Shreya. Good debut there. Let's do this again next week.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, we'll do that again. You can go back and listen to any of that at kfhradio.com. Chad will get that segmented out for you, KU fans. Sounds like Nevada might be an opportunity to score some points. We'll talk, of course, more about that later in the week. Tommy and I will take a quick break. On the way out, let's give away our final pair of ICTI's Classic tickets, which is the NHL preseason game with the Arizona Coyotes and St. Louis Blues. That's Saturday, September 23rd, 7 o'clock, Intrust Bank Arena. Final pair of tickets. Chad will get us a winner. We'll come back. More Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. Thanks to Shreyas Laddha for his first visit with us about KU. Nice job there by Shreyas. You can go back and listen to that, kfhradio.com. Congratulations to Scott for winning those final pair of hockey tickets to see the NHL preseason game at Interest Bank Arena next weekend. All right, Tommy, let's look ahead to tonight's game. That Fox in their pregame did, I think Aaron Andrews interviewed Aaron Rodgers, and they did it up with all the music. I was finding myself and I don't watch Hard Knocks, so maybe everyone's been like this for a little while, but I'm finding myself like getting more and more hyped up for this. I'm so excited for the Jets. The Bills are an interesting matchup. I'm going to take the Bills tonight here just because if there is an offensive line issue early in the year, I think the Bills, this is going to be a problem for the Jets. If you watch the Cowboys last night and what they did to the Giants offensive line, boy, there is a lot of pressure on this Jets O-line, and that's been a story. And the Bills are going to get after it, rushing the passer too a little bit. I like the Bills. I'm so intrigued by this Aaron Rodgers storyline. The Jets' schedule is brutal. This is going to be fascinating to see how quickly they can get out of the gates. I've said since the summer, I think it'll be a little slow out of the gates, and then they're going to really be good by the end of the year. I don't know. What are you thinking on this? Because the Bills have been the least talked about, I think, great team in the NFL. And I imagine that they're ready to play a football game pretty badly.
You know what? Like I've been very open about it for a long time. I'm all in on the Jets. And I'm going to double down on that because some of my other picks from the weekend were not very good, including the Seahawks and the Giants. I mean, I feel like they were both playoff teams, and now I'm not so sure. So I'm all in on the Jets. And, I think the fact that they have embraced this mentality of it's Super Bowl or bust, it's either going to be incredible for the Jets or it's going to be a massive disappointment. There is no in between, I feel like, for the Jets with Aaron Rodgers and the fact that they've loaded up for him for this season. That being said, out of the teams that have been historically dominant in the AFC for the last 3 or 4 years, the Bills are the last one standing after, week one. And they've got the opportunity to be the last one standing after week one. The Chiefs lost and the Bengals lost. And then really it's the Buffalo Bills, historically speaking, as the class of that conference, right? So I think that you are right in the thought that they have not been discussed and talked about as much as maybe they should have been throughout the offseason, but it's really because all eyes were on the Jets and what they were doing, bringing in Aaron Rodgers and then signing Dalvin Cook and then the additions at wide receiver. Plus they still have Garrett Wilson, who was a fantastic rookie a season ago. That being said, though, I'm still all in on the Jets. Knowing how brutal their schedule is to start off the season, they've got to win this game at home to kick off the season. They just have to. If they want to have a chance to win that division, it really starts in week one with the divisional matchup, knowing the Dolphins have already got a victory. They're already 1-0 in that division, and you've got a really tough schedule moving forward. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, they've got to win this opening game.
The Patriots looked respectable too. I think against the Eagles, that was a very close game. It is, and I've had a hard time with this because like people that are very predictive and like do it for a living, they do look at the schedule and try to guess like outcomes of games. Whereas I think for us and for most people, it's like, yeah, I love the thought of Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, but it is a tough road. And so like, can they hammer it out? And of course, Rodgers can. Like, it's Aaron Rodgers. It's just how quickly can they do it? Breece Hall looks like he'll be good to go tonight. I suspect that the Jets would like to run the ball a little bit against Buffalo to take the pressure off of that offensive line. I don't know how equipped their weaponry is to be a quick strike offense. I have no idea. I know Garrett Wilson's one of my favorite players. Like, I love Garrett Wilson this year, and I think he's going to be great. But, is Aaron Rodgers going to have time to get him downfield and all of these things? But I think tonight, Tommy, it's as much about the Bills. Everyone's going to look and watch Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. It's been the number one story of the offseason. The Bills have been forgotten about in a lot of ways. Like, the Bills might be the best team in football. That's not an overstatement at all, especially when we look at the top end of the league and what we've seen. Like, the Bills are still there. They haven't gotten over that hump. They've been so close. Like, they're right there. And Steph Diggs is there, and that's behind them, and they feel good about James Cook. And, you got Josh Allen, who was fantastic last year. Like, the Bills are a great team, and nobody's talking about them. And I think they probably noticed that a little bit. Josh Allen and Steph Diggs certainly feel like they're wired that kind of way. Like, hey, don't forget about us here. We're still the top dogs, and we're
that's
still
Sean McDermott. That's Sean
crop.
McDermott too. I mean, he's got that workman-like attitude, right? Where it's, go in and just handle your business and do your thing. And I think that there's a part of the Bills and probably a part of Sean McDermott also that kind of likes the fact that all the attention is going to Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, because it allows them to just kind of go to work. It allows them to just kind of do their thing. And, so believe me, as soon as Aaron Rodgers signed where was traded to the Jets, joined that organization, as soon as Dalvin Cook signed with the organization, as soon as they added more skill position players, as soon as the Jets ended up on Hard Knocks, when all of those things happened, you better believe that the Buffalo Bills circled that opening game on their calendar. Like, okay, all the attention, the media, the spotlight, all of it is in New York. And it usually is with that media and all of that. But especially now with the talent that's been assembled in New York and Super Bowl or bust and all of that, you better believe that the Buffalo Bills said, okay, that's great. Take all the attention, take the spotlight, take all of it. And we're just going to come into town in week 1 and we're going to beat you. And so it should be, at least in my mind, a heavyweight matchup tonight for Monday Night Football. I don't think that there could be a better matchup to wrap up week number 1. Again, I'm all in on the Jets. I think that they are going to win the division. I picked them to win the division. I think that they are going to, go at least win one playoff game. I don't think that they're going to go any further than that, but I'm all in on them. I think they win this game, but man, it should be a blow by blow heavyweight bout between these two teams.
Yeah, I don't really care as much about them winning the division as just getting there, because I think if they get there, they become very, very, very dangerous. It's Aaron Rodgers, it's cold weather, it's all those things. That's the thing for me is can they get up to speed quick enough just to make sure they get there? Because Miami, I don't know how good Miami is going to be. That was an impressive offense performance yesterday, but not defensive. So who's going to be there? The Chiefs are going to be there. We know Cincinnati struggled, but we're pretty certain Cincinnati will be there. Baltimore looked good. They played Houston. So, the Jets could be the 6th or 7th best team and be fine. And I think that, like, for me, that's what I'm looking at. If they can beat the Bills tonight, then I think we can go more to your, like, maybe they are good enough to win this division. I think that might be a little much early, but this is Aaron Rodgers, right? Is this Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago? Is this Aaron Rodgers last year? Is it somewhere in between? How quickly can Breece Hall bounce back and them have a dynamic running game? And does this offensive line hold up? We all believe in their defense. Their defense should be great, one of the best in the league. It's just, how can they protect enough? Can they block enough to make this work? Because if they can, I think you're right. I think they'll be in the mix with everybody in the AFC. But if that struggles early, I think it may take a little time, and we'll see. I love this matchup. I love that it's Monday Night Football. We didn't get the primetime matchup last night that we'd hoped for. The Cowboys just crushed. We got a great game on Thursday night. Hopefully we get it. Let's talk about the Cowboys a little bit, Tommy, as we continue through the NFL. I don't remember if I said it here or if I said it on a weekend CBS Sports Shift, but I'll just say it again because I can't remember. I think that the Cowboys, because people, Vegas was kind of in on the Cowboys this year, and I just am not a Mike McCarthy guy, but my thought has been for a while, if this is truly a special, like, best defense in the league, one of the better defenses we've seen, like, if they can play that absolute highest level of defense, that's the only way I could see them having a chance here. And I still believe that. And obviously they played that way last night. But I will say, and again, I'm not a Mike McCarthy guy, but he's sort of taken on the bet on yourself mentality here, calling the plays. I do think and this has always been my problem with Kellen Moore, as much as I like Kellen Moore as like a brain for football, and I love that he landed in LA, he was not a good fit for Dak because Dak is not a downfield thrower like that. He's not accurate enough. And so, unless guys are running wide open, which was a thing when Dak was a little more mobile, but not as much anymore, like throwing the ball down the field like that never fit for Dak. To me, last night, Dak was put in a much better position to be successful and not make mistakes and, add those things that you like. And his tight ends were dropping passes and all this stuff. I will say that through 1 week, and it's 1 week, the way that Mike McCarthy used Dak made more sense than what we've seen Dak be used in the last couple of years.
Everybody after the game, all they talked about was how dominant and elite the Cowboys defense was. And they were, right? Like they've got Micah Parsons and crew around him. They looked fantastic. The fact that the Cowboys offensively didn't score a touchdown until the 26th point of the game, I mean, is insane. It's remarkable. And that was special teams also. But yeah, the defense is absolutely elite. But I actually look at something else. And it kind of touches on what you mentioned. That offense for the Cowboys, it was addition by subtraction in 2 areas. Kellen Moore, out the door. Ezekiel Elliott, out the door. The running game looked significantly better without Ezekiel Elliott as the lead back. Tony Pollard looked good. Rico Dowdle, I thought, was a nice change of pace back also. Deuce Vaughn got a little bit of action towards the very end of the game. But I feel like not having Kellen Moore calling the plays and not having Ezekiel Elliott. And there was an expectation, I think, that with Elliott on the team and with the contract that he had, that you have to use him and you have to use him as kind of the bell cow running back. It ultimately hurt the offense, I think, for the Cowboys. But man, with Mike McCarthy calling the plays and being free of having to give the ball to Ezekiel Elliott multiple times a game, I thought offensively, they looked so much more free and just able to do things that they probably wanted to do for a long time. So yeah, the defense is elite, but also having those 2 guys, Kellen Moore and Ezekiel Elliott, no longer part of the organization, I thought helped them out offensively big time.
I sort of agree with you. The reason that run game looked like it did is because for the first time in a couple of years, you saw a healthy Cowboys offensive line almost. They were still missing a starter, by the way. But you're talking about a line that has 2 Hall of Famers on it, right? In Zach Martin and Tyron Smith. Those guys haven't been healthy together like for a sustained amount of time for a little while. And so they were still missing. If the offensive line can stay healthy, I don't care who the back is, they're going to look good. I actually think Zeke would help this team. I still think, and Deuce Vaughn got in there behind sort of a backup offensive line. So it's kind of hard to evaluate that. I wish he would have got in just a little bit earlier because Turpin is an interesting player. Turpin is not he looks smaller than Deuce Vaughn out there. Turpin's not that. That's not it for him. Dowdle, I don't know. I mean, I think his nickname's like the Bull. Like that's what they need. They need just a smasher, and they're going to have to be really careful with Tony Pollard in that, a lot rides on him, but that line, Tommy, is good. And they looked really good, and they're healthy-ish right now, healthier than they have been. Zeke would look good behind that line still because Zeke gets to the hole. But he
didn't have a great debut for the Patriots yesterday. Fumbled the ball and
what I'm saying, and I say good. Good's relative. Like he could be a 4-yard plus an average carrier behind a good offensive line because he's decisive and he's always moving forward. That's what one of these young guys is going to have to show. That they can do that, just get to a hole quickly and move forward. Because I don't know that I think the Cowboys are going to be this offense that, like, what Kellen Moore wanted them to be just didn't fit the personnel. What Kellen Moore wanted them to be, like, you'll see that in LA this year with a quarterback who can just launch missiles on the money down the field with dynamic. Like, just watch how good LA's offense is this year. That's what, like, Kellen Moore's not a bad offensive coordinator. He was a bad fit for Dallas for a long time because it just didn't fit right? Like, Dak's not an accurate downfield throw. He never has been.
The other thing I noticed too with Mike McCarthy calling the plays last night, and granted, it's really easy to be happy when you're up 26-0 at halftime and you win 40-0. But Mike McCarthy looked happier than I've ever seen him as the head coach of the Cowboys last night. Again, it's easy when you're winning by that margin, but man, I watched him going off the field at halftime, like big old smile on his face. And like, I don't know, Mike McCarthy to me throughout the entire time he's been an NFL head coach has perfected the sour look, right? Like just unhappy, kind of guy
for good reason.
And it makes me wonder, and I know you're not a Mike McCarthy believer, but it makes me wonder if he's calling the plays this season with the personnel they have, with Dan Quinn doing running the defense and
best
and the personnel there
they could have made was getting Dan Quinn back.
That maybe Mike McCarthy
it could work.
Is the guy.
So that's my point. I'm not a Mike McCarthy guy. It's been this weird dynamic as a Cowboys fan because I didn't think personnel wise they added enough to like put them over the edge, but they're healthier and that matters, right? Dan Quinn was the most important offseason move they could have made for sure. Micah Parsons might be the best defensive player in football. He is just incredible to watch play football. All that to the side. I like Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator. I did not like Kellen Moore in Dallas. It never made sense to me. I'm not a Mike McCarthy guy. He's shown us 8 billion times, like as far as like in-game general, he ain't the best, not even close. But there absolutely is this way that he has a grasp of like, here's what we have to do offensively with what we have. And maybe that works. That's my big, sort of takeaway is this sustainable for them? Because clearly the game got away from the Giants last night. I mean, it's sort of hard to evaluate it. But if Mike McCarthy has this better understanding, right, of the way to use Dak Prescott, that's where I start to wonder, like, okay, maybe Dallas could hang. Like, could Dallas be up there with San Fran? And we get to see the Cowboys and Niners play in week 5. Cannot wait for that game. But could it be, even with, like, I really like Kellen Moore in general, just didn't like him with Dallas. He moves on. Don't like Mike McCarthy. But all this has made the Cowboys better in this weird way because Mike McCarthy, I think, just has a better, understanding of what Dak Prescott is at this point in his career. And if he's not running, he's interesting, but not what he used to be. What can he do? Well, if those tight ends will catch the ball, you throw short to intermediate passes. You let him run occasionally and take a few shots because the Cowboys do. And I get it from Kellen Moore's perspective, right? Michael Gallup is a good deep ball guy. CeeDee Lamb's as good a receiver as there is in football. So I get wanting to take, but that's not Dak. Like he's not, you've got to get those guys wide open as they did on a couple of plays last night and just take a play action shot once or twice a game because just like, I don't know. It's almost like the Cowboys for a while didn't watch Dak play football ever in his whole life to know that like him throwing the ball 20, 25 yards down the field. That's why he had so many interceptions. Like it's not what he does. That's not what he's good at. And so I'm very curious to see if it's sustainable. Because if it is, Tommy, they're absolutely a Super Bowl contender.
You mentioned watching what Kellen Moore does with the Chargers, and I think you're right. I think that we're going to see Justin Herbert air the ball out a lot more than in the past. And he did that to an extent yesterday for sure. That being said, the Chargers have a lot more issues than that.
Sure.
Defensively. And again, I know that the Dolphins have a significant amount of weapons and Tyreek Hill went off
they got
yesterday.
One.
But they've got Jalen Waddle and
I know.
Tua,
I'm just saying they've got
Tua looks
one
phenomenal, but they've got a lot. The Chargers have a lot more issues than Kellen Moore coming in as offensive coordinator. I think that's the least of them. I mean, I don't even think that's a concern at all. I think he'll do really well.
It's not a concern. It's going to help their offense.
Yeah. But defensively, man, they've got some issues. And I know we haven't talked much about the division outside of the Chiefs yesterday, but it doesn't matter. I don't feel like who the head coach is. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Doesn't matter who the players are. The Chargers are going to charger. They're going to do what they do. They're going to, it's hard to trust them because they're going to have all of these expectations and a ton of talent. And then they're going to lose in week 1 against the Dolphins. So they've got some issues defensively. That penalty on J.C. Jackson was one of the worst penalties that I've ever seen a player do. It set up a field goal for the Dolphins.
Isn't
and then they
Brandon
lose by 2
Staley
points.
supposed to be this defensive whiz?
Supposed to
Why
be.
is he still there? Like,
I don't know.
if
I
they're
don't know.
not good defensively, why is he still there? It is so strange because,
You know, and
his
then-
in-game stuff has been well documented how bad he's been
Yeah.
in-game. But they're like, he's a defensive guy. Like, what if he's not got a good defense, why is he there?
Oh, and by the way, if we also want to talk about the division, it's good to see Sean Payton has everything fixed in Denver. And I say that sarcastically because it was not good for the Broncos. And after everything that Sean Payton talked about over the course of the offseason, the Broncos put up 16 points in the opener against the Raiders.
There's a talent issue. They got to get Jerry Jeudy back. I'm not going to make any bold predictions with Denver yet. But the Chargers, I'll tell you this with the Chargers, the Chiefs, I already have made bets because the Chiefs are under a field goal, by the way, which never happens. So that's out there. The Cowboys, we haven't seen the Jets. Boy, if that offense, the Cowboys line right now is at 3, Tommy. If the Jets offensive line struggles tonight, that line, I'll bet you, will jump to at least 5 before. So I've already done that, and I already took the Chargers too, as well, against the Titans. Like, because that's only like a field goal game too. So like, I'm a bounce back to reality kind of guy. I'm either gonna like dig my hole deeper or feel better about the way I thought this season might go after another week of betting. Ooh, it was rough yesterday. It was great in college football though. Let's come back. We will look around the sports world. Some injuries to pay attention to, I think, as well, that we're getting some news on. That's all coming next on Sports Data. Welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. It's Albracht and Castor on a Monday. Mondays are always fun because we get to react to all the things. Fantasy football players out there, J.K. Dobbins out for the year. The Ravens finally get him back, Tommy, and he's out for the year again. Oh, my goodness. Like the snake-bitten injury for that guy. Whew.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. And I guess the only silver lining for the Ravens is that they have other running backs.
They know how to go by without him.
Right? Like they've got Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, and I know Justice Hill had 2 touchdowns yesterday, but still brutal for J.K. Dobbins. And I feel bad for that guy because he has looked, when healthy, really, really good.
They're going to be good. I don't know how much you saw of that. We were talking about the contenders and everything else. I don't know how much you saw that game. I saw quite a bit. Zay Flowers is lightning fast.
He's the real deal.
Bateman looked the good fits for Lamar Jackson. I don't know what to make of Houston, like as far as the defense goes. I do know, though, that they have D'Amico Ryans now. So one of the great defensive minds in football. So I think their defense could actually be okay. The Ravens are going to be really interesting to watch this year because whether it's the most talented group of receivers Lamar Jackson's had, I think it's the best fit of receivers he's had because it's like short space, get ball, lightning fast kind of guy. They'll be interesting.
Keep in mind, they were without Mark Andrews yesterday also. So you add him back into the mix. That's another weapon for Lamar Jackson.
Yep. The Ravens, they're going to sneak around and like all of a sudden have the most wins in the AFC or something crazy. That's an overstatement. Don't put that in pen. It just like you watch that and you're like, this looks like it's going to work and fit well. All right, we'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network today here as we wrap up this Monday edition. It's Albracht and Castor. We'll be right back.
Keep your water heater heating, stop your faucet from leaking. Just call up the pros at David Lease Plumbing.
David Lease Plumbing has an open position for an experienced service plumber. If you or a plumber you know is looking for a plumbing career with competitive industry pay and benefits, please give us a call at 945-0117. We take care of our customers' needs while maintaining a positive working environment for our employees.
Let David Lease Plumbing give your plumbing a new lease on life.
I'm Ty Burrell, actor and small business owner. I'm going to show you my 5 steps for making the perfect radio ad. This one's about innovation refunds and the ERC. First step, be relatable. As a small business owner, I know that filing for the ERC tax refund can feel complicated and confusing. Also, I like pizza and puppies. There, done. Step 2, cold hard info. The ERC, or Employee Retention Credit for long, is a tax credit for eligible businesses that kept employees on payroll in 2020 and 2021.
That's it. We've reacted. Monday in the books. We'll come back tomorrow. Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, joins us. Cannot wait to talk to him about week 1 and get his thoughts there. Coming up on the network today, you've got the Chris Lamb, Wichita State volleyball coaches show at 6 o'clock, followed by Monday Night Football right here on KFH. Bills, Jets, Jim Rome. Right after us, Bob and Jeff, 2 to 4 locally. Tommy, it's football season.
I'm so happy. You can just tell the smile on my face. It's back. It's there. I'm ready to go.
All right, that'll do it for Tommy and Jad. I'm Jacob. See you tomorrow.